I invite you to stand for the reading of the Gospel. Today reading from John 15, verses 1 to 8. Jesus speaks to his disciples and says, "I am the true vine, and the Creator is the vine grower, who removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, God prunes to make it bear more fruit. You have already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me, you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burnt. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. The Almighty is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples." Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. A few weeks ago, our school system experienced something it had never experienced before. Several days of e-learning. A real sign of the 21st century in times of learning. We are used to getting a break, especially in the winter. There's a reason for the children not to go to school, for instance, a heavy snowfall. The district does not reduce the number of schools, but rather shifts them. I have fond memories of keeping the boys home from school where they were little because the snow or the ice made it hard for the people to get to the school. And I have memories of sleeping in, of watching cartoons, of baking cookies. Those were special days. What I didn't tell them at the time was that, not to spoil the moment, was that they'd have to make that day up. There's no such thing as a free lunch, and there's no such thing as a day off school. Sometime later, maybe during spring break or later, they would have to stretch the school year just so that they could fit that one in. But for our school system here in Columbus, they now have a second way of dealing with those kinds of days when school is closed for the students. Now, our snow days eat into the students' spring break. But when recent flooding made it unsafe for some children in the community to get to school, that's when the school decided to use this other way of doing it, not extending the year into the summer, but rather allowing the students to work from home. At the beginning of the school year, each student has been issued an electronic device for learning, whether a laptop or a tablet. They use it daily for work at school, for assignments and other things. The shift this time was that this weather-related emergency allowed the teachers to send assignments through the computer, through the internet, and the kids were able to, at home, connect either with their school-issued computer or with their own computer with the assignment that the teacher had given them, and they were able to work from home. The system even allowed for the students to be in real-time conversation, chatting with their teacher during their e-learning day at home. Now, for our two boys, they're a little older, it was a manageable task, even though we had to be flexible and maybe supervise a little bit. But I know that for some families it became a harder issue because maybe the children were younger, or they were special needs, or maybe because the parents' job situation did not allow for that much flexibility. So when the first day of e-learning was done, even though the kids were puzzled by it, it felt like a good thing. And they felt like Is this like a snow day? Well, no, you do have to work. And it was an opportunity for them to sort of feel like, I don't know, like grown-ups connecting, telecommuting even. And at the evening of that first e-learning day, after they had gone to bed, we got another text from the school that says there was going to be another e-learning day the following day. So I woke up the boys to let them know that, and they were disappointed. They wanted to go to school. I wasn't expecting that. And that happened a third day. And I took away from that reaction that their learning experience is more than just a completion of tasks. It is about the communication and the communion with peers and with instructors. That without it, there might be a missing element in what we do. Learning in the first century context was very much about community and very much about staying close to the teacher. While there were places of learning in the first century, they didn't look quite like our places of learning. We didn't have public schools. They didn't have public schools like we do. Learning, whether it was to become a carpenter or whether it was to teach the scriptures, was something that was deeply connected to being with the teacher and was very experiential. In biblical times, the Jews would go to learning centers, would go to the synagogues to be connected to the rabbis, to learn from them. They taught them and they showed them how to be a follower. All learning, academic or practical, was done by apprenticeship, following someone closely, receiving on-the-job training. And so a central element of learning was staying close to the teacher until the time came for the student to be on their own, for the student to become the teacher themselves. Perhaps you know Ken Blanchard. He is the author of a book that was quite famous, 1 Minute Manager. Well, he wrote a book later called Lead Like Jesus, in which he took his learning about management and learning about leadership and tried to connect to see how it was that Jesus did the teaching and did the leadership development of the disciples. And so he adapted some of his learnings on situational leadership. And he argued that Jesus taught his disciples in a way to help them grow in their knowledge and incrementally giving them the ability to put their knowledge into practice. And so he had these 4 categories of how someone is in that process of learning and of developing leadership. First, you have a novice. A novice is someone who's just starting out. And what do they need? They need instruction. And so the teacher spends a great deal of time offering them very basic information, ground level kind of stuff. As they grow in their leadership, then comes the opportunity to become an apprentice. That's someone who's in training. What do they need? They need coaching. And so the teacher is there, yes, to offer some instruction, but to offer practice and then evaluation, so that there's a kind of dialogue as that student is growing. Then he names this category of journey person, someone who is able now to do some work on their own. But what do they need? They need mentoring. And so the teacher's still there, giving the assignments and then offering encouragement, because now this person has a great deal more independence in what they do. And then the final category that Blanchard talks about is the master teacher. Finally, here is someone who is able to teach others. But again, what do they need? So the teacher is there to commission them, to say, now this is your task. The teacher affirms them and gives them that autonomy to be able to send them out, but is still connected to the disciple. The student and the teacher remain connected to each other. And as you can imagine, there isn't just one category of leadership. It isn't like I become an expert in everything. I may be an expert in my times tables, but I may be a novice in how to do something with trigonometry. I'm looking at Dale. I may be at the same time a master teacher and a novice. And so the teacher is there to weave in and out the opportunity to help that student grow. And for that, they need to stay connected. And the teacher needs to know at what level of growth that student is, to give them the kind of teaching, mentoring, coaching, encouragement that is needed at that stage. It built on itself, and it required that integral connection with the teacher. That's why the story of the vine makes such sense to me. I don't look at it as a person who's a gardener. I don't have a green thumb. I look at it as the productivity of the connection between the teacher and that student. And the word that Jesus uses is abide, which is to live with or live in connection to the teacher. It represents the model of how they taught with apprenticeship of all of these things, whether it is a trade or deeper knowledge. And so the vine and the branches make this beautiful image that Jesus wanted them to hold on to. And he says to them very clearly, stay close to me. Watch, learn, apply it. If you do, you will be productive. Fruit will come from this. What's more, being with Jesus as a disciple meant that they lived together. There was a community of learning. No wonder he uses that word, to abide with them. Live here. Stay with me. Live with this teaching. And let the teaching, let the words live in you. Let that be what courses through your veins. And then live in a community of learners. Live with and into the reality of love that God is ushering in. Jesus is gone now. We are left with a question as to what abiding with Jesus means for us today. Which brings me back to the e-learning days. One of the discoveries, maybe not earth-shattering, but one of the discoveries for me was that communities of learning have a particular benefit when they truly happen in community, in person, not just through a device, but that there's more to it than that. That's what, to me, it made sense that they had that chatting function. It wasn't just, here's your problems, let me know what your answers are. It was an opportunity to question and receive answers. One of the ways that children are going to learn is going to be more than just of what happens on a device. It has to be about interaction. And as a community of faith, when we gather on a given Sunday, we gather to be together, we gather to praise God, but also we gather in a way for on-the-job training as believers, on-the-job training as students of the faith. And we are all on different stages in our faith journey. Some of us are new to it, some of us have been at it for decades. We come to live with God's teachings, even if it's just for a moment, letting ourselves abide in the Spirit, in the information, or as Blanchard would say, ready for Jesus to coach us, to mentor us, to commission us to service. But of course, that on-the-job training can't possibly just happen on 2 hours on a Sunday morning. It's also the time that we spend living with the words of Jesus, abiding with the Spirit, and the Spirit abiding with us on Monday morning and every other day of the week. Maybe the distractions of our daily routines derail us. Maybe we forget the need to abide and to live intentionally in God's teachings and to let them guide our behavior. But I dare say that it is when the challenges come that we'll get the feeling that those stranded students had, that distance learning isn't cutting it for me. I need my people. I need my God to guide me. And so as a community of faith, maybe that's when we pick up the phone and we have that opportunity for lunch and conversation and prayer with a neighbor or a friend or a family member. Or maybe that is when we gather for study on an evening to think about how our life is connected to God and God to us. The investment in learning, the investment in community is the investment in faith. And it will bear fruit. The fruit of God's limitless love shared. It will bear fruit, the fruit of God's peace truly resting in our hearts. It will bear fruit, the fruit of God's courage to push against the lies of hate and oppression which aim to derail God's realm. The longer we live with the life lessons, or the life-giving lessons of Jesus, the shocking news of God's love for all, the more we'll be able to live into the priorities of the realm of God. Only deeply connecting with the guidance of Jesus as our teacher will our labor yield the fruit that God hopes for. Thanks be to God for God's word for us.